Good morning, everyone. Good morning. This is LaShawn. I am back again with another episode of Sitting with Sisters. I am so excited this morning to be talking to someone who I've been wanting to get on for a long time, and I finally got her. Uh, say good morning, hello, whatever time it is in your zone, to Miss JuJu Harris.
Good morning.
Good morning, Juju. Thank you so much for being able to join us today.
My pleasure.
Okay, so we're going to get started with this interview, and let's start with you just giving us a brief intro of how you got started in pet sitting. Uh, did it start as solo travel like it did for so many others, or did you
Mhm.
just go right into pet sitting? Have you been doing that for a while and just started traveling with it? How did that start for you? Because from what you said, you have children, you're married. So how did you go from all of that and working to traveling the world and pet sitting?
One of my girlfriends told me about pet sitting years and years ago, and I thought, wow, that sounds really like a cool way to go. And then in 2021, I had the opportunity to go to Italy as a nanny for a week. And I said, well, look, once you're done with me, just leave me there. I've always wanted to go to Italy. And I found another gig first through the Worldwide Organization of Organic Farmers to work on a goat farm in the north of Italy. And then I remembered the trusted house sitting. I was like, oh my gosh, wait a minute, I could do that. And applied and was offered a position for a month in the La Marche region. And it was fantastic. It was just a small little house that was owned by Brits, and they let me use their car. They said, whatever's in the refrigerator or in the cellar, you're welcome to have that. The lady's a excellent cook, so she had so much good food. And yeah, they introduced me to their friends so that I would have connections in the neighborhood. And one of the people that they invited, my first night there, Lucy had a meet and greet for me so I could meet her friends. And a couple that she invited was an American couple who had been house sitting for 2 years already, just around the world and working remotely. They were both professors, and they said, yeah, we've been doing this for the last couple of years. There's no sense for us to keep an apartment because we can work remotely. You can go all over the world with this. And they were really my
Yeah.
inspiration, thinking of this like, wow, this could be a lifestyle. This can just
Uh
not
huh.
even be just like a one-off situation every now and then.
Yep.
And so I had such a great experience that first time. I just felt like this is what I'm always going to do, because
Wow.
what always ends up costing the most for traveling is the lodging.
Yep.
And
Yep.
I like the idea of having a home base, especially with the houses that offer you the use of a car or that are very close
Mhm.
to metro, because then you can have
Mhm.
have the stability, the comfort. It's much more personal than staying in a hotel or an Airbnb, and
Absolutely.
being able to investigate and explore the area.
Hmm. So now, what did you do about your job when you made this decision? I want to do this on a regular basis. What did you do about your job? What did you do about your family? What did your husband and your kids say?
Yeah, well, for that first trip, I wasn't working because I quit my job to take care of my mom her last year of life. But then
Okay.
in the future jobs, as it was year after actually the next year, um, in January, February of 2022, I said, wow, it's been a year since I worked. I need to find a job. And so I applied for a position, and I just said, if I don't get that job, it's cool. I'll just go to Italy. And so they sent me an email that said, you're wonderful. You got great qualifications, but we don't want to interview you. And I said, fine. I sat right down in my backyard and bought my ticket to Italy. And I said, okay, I'm
Yeah.
going to go for 3 months.
Thank you,
And then,
God. Thank you,
right.
God. I'm going to Italy.
Yeah, forget you. I'll go have fun instead of standing around in
Yeah.
DC. Thank you. And
Yeah.
so then 3 weeks later, they sent me an email and said, we'd love for you to come in for an interview tomorrow. And I sent them a message
No.
back and I said, I'm no longer interested in the position. And these are folks who
Sorry.
know me through my work locally. And they're like, oh, we were really looking forward to working with you this year, Juju. And I'm like, you didn't say that 3 weeks ago. I
3 weeks
have a
ago.
ticket and
Thank
I'm
you.
leaving in 2 weeks.
Thank
So
you. Yeah.
that trip, I that was a great trip because I went back to see people that I had met through the house sitting.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then I did a bunch of other house sits around in Italy. Beautiful places. Italy's just I feel like my second home. Beautiful places like, Clutch Your Pearls, beautiful kind of, you walk, this one house I did, walked into to the living room and it had this view across this valley, their grapevine, their
Mm-hmm.
vineyards and their olive trees. And it was just fantastic. And as for, leaving my family, that was easy. People would say, how can you leave your husband and your kids? And I say, I make a decision, I buy a ticket, I pack my bag, I walk out the door. I've been married for 26 years. And before Valentine and I even got married, I told him, I said, look, when I was younger, I never took the chance to walk around the world, walk the C&O Canal, walk the Appalachian Trail, get on a plane, get on a train. I never did that. And I know that's
Mm-hmm.
something that I have to do in my life for, my life to feel complete. And I said, so
Mm-hmm.
at some point, I'm going to tell you it's time for me to go. And it won't mean I don't love you. It won't mean that I need a divorce. It just means that it's time for me to leave. And so he said, okay, well, I'll take care of the home and the children till you get back. So, got a good one there. Or maybe he was just desperate for a green card. He's from Paraguay.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
but yeah. So when I was on that trip, initially it was for 3 months. And then I was like, I don't want to go back home. I'm not ready to go back home. I have this
Mm-hmm.
opportunity. I'm here. I know how to travel inexpensively through the trusted house sitting or this other program, Workaway. And so
Mm-hmm.
I called him and said, well, I'm not going to be home until later in the year. And he was really missing me. I mean, my kids were calling me and saying, Poppy's not okay. He's spending all his time in the room. He seems really depressed. And I was just like, well, that's unfortunate. I told him that I was going to go and this is what I have to do. So,
Mm-hmm.
I actually sent him home to see his father. I bought him a ticket to go to Paraguay to see his dad because
Okay.
I said, I don't know when I'll be back. And there's no
Mm-hmm.
sense of you sitting there miserable, missing me when I'm living my life.
Yeah.
Go do something. you know. So
Yeah.
after
So,
Italy, I went
so,
to
so
Croatia.
now
I'm
what?
sorry.
Now, what did the kids do while you were away and Dad was away? So, what? So,
Oh,
I mean, so were they grown at this time, or
yeah, yeah. So we have
okay?
two boys who are 25 and 21. And
Okay.
so this was in 2022 that this trip happened. My oldest son and his partner were living here in a studio apartment we have on our property.
Uh-huh.
And my youngest was 19. And so, my 19-year-old went crazy and evidently had parties that were big enough for the neighbors to notice something was going on. Because it's like, ooh, first time mom and dad
He's
are
like,
gone, I'm going to
woo!
party. And then my older son and his partner were calling me saying, guess what Zazu did? Guess what Zazu did? I'm like, I don't care what Zazu did. I'm in Croatia. What can I do? I
Thank
There's
you.
nothing I can do. And actually this was going on after my husband got back. Even they were still calling me saying, guess what Zazu did? I'm like, I don't need to guess what Zazu did. You guys are adults, supposedly. Your dad
Yeah.
is there.
Figure it out.
Leave me
Handle it.
alone. I'm in Croatia and I'm not
Yeah.
planning on coming back anytime soon. And at that point, I was planning on going to Turkey to do a workaway, and then eventually
Mm-hmm.
circling back and coming back to Italy because about the Schengen rules. You can only be in these countries 3 months at a time. Then you have to
Right.
leave for
Right.
3 months and then go back in.
Mm-hmm.
But my family was really screwing up. I was getting emails that the bills, were due and not being paid, and I was frustrated. So eventually, I cut my trip short. I came back. I was furious and pissed for months because these supposedly four adults were not taking care of business. So I told them the next time I leave, you all need to leave the house and I'm going to get a house sitter because you guys aren't taking care of business. Um, I mean, I have gotten a little pushback, but they also understand like this is what I have to do for myself. My life isn't
Mm-hmm.
about them. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it
Mm-hmm.
was, yeah, of course it's about them because I love them, but my time
Yeah,
is for me
they
now.
don't need you in this they don't need you in the same way anymore. Yeah. So
No, no.
yeah.
Evidently, my husband did because he's sitting around crying for me. But whatever. So I did that. That was 2022. 2023, I was actually started working full time because I had to come back and save my house from these idiots. And then I worked full time, but I took a month and went to Italy and Belgium because a couple of my best friends were really kind of going through it. And then later that year, I just was thinking like, you know what, this doesn't work for me. I mean, when I started that job, I thought, okay, I could see being here for 7 years. And then after a while, I was like, I could see being here 5 to 7 years. And then it was like, I could see being here 3 to 5 years. And then it was like, how about another year and a half? And it's like, you know what? I'm gonna give it six
I'm
months.
ready to go.
Yeah, it's just like the time was reducing. And part of that was just because, I kept a blog at the time and I need to reactivate it. It's called Coloring Outside the Lines. And I said, I
Okay.
feel like the world is on fire, and I don't know when the world's going to burn or whatever, but, there's major shakeup. And while this body is still intact, while my mind is still intact, I want to get out
Hmm.
and see what is going on.
Yep.
And I've been
Yep.
enough places and met enough people to know that basically people are the same. Places are
Hmm.
basically the same. It's just those
Hmm.
little differences that make it so interesting, that make
Yeah.
traveling fantastically
Yes. Yes.
interesting, and the funny little experiences you have. I mean, it just makes life richer.
Okay. Now,
Yeah.
I saw on because we're both members of the Facebook group Sisters Who Sit, and I saw one of your posts where you had a sit with goats and all these other animals. That is a very unique sit, at least in my book, because I've
Mhm.
never even seen any of all that stuff. So, can you tell us about that sit?
Sure. So when I do my interviews with the hosts, I ask for a video tour, just kind of get a sense of like who the animals are and what their needs are and stuff. And one of the questions I usually ask is your house haunted? And so this particular time, this lady reached out to me because at some point I'd gone through the listings and I had favorited her profile because she has
Hmm.
goats. I have a thing for goats. I love goats. I love farms. And so she contacted me, really wonderful woman. And we just hit it off right away. Turns out her daughter was even in Peace Corps, Paraguay, where my husband's from, which is amazing.
Hmm.
And so I went
What
down.
country? What country was that in?
So this was in Virginia, Southern Virginia. So I
Oh,
do
okay.
international
Okay.
sits as well as local.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, and I do
Okay.
the
So this
local
is
sits just to get a break, just to go see
yeah.
something new because I don't even know my own country really.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So drove down there, and it was this funky kind of ramshackly farmhouse on 80 acres at the top of this mountain at the end of this road, and it was beautiful and quiet. She has a herd of goats and some donkeys and some dogs and a cat, some chickens. And so we were sitting there
Wow.
talking, just it's getting to know her. And I said, oh, well, how did you end up in this house? How long you been here? And she says, oh, 35 years. I raised my kids here. I was living someplace else, but then that place got condemned, and someone told me about this place. And other people were saying, well, you don't want that place because it's haunted. And I kind of like perked up my ears, like, really now? And she said, yeah, the young man who lived here before committed suicide. And so
Mm,
people said the place was haunted. And I didn't. Her children were small when she moved in there, and she said, but
mhm.
at one point after they'd been there for a little while, her kids said, "Mommy, who's that man in black that we see walking around?" And
Wow.
and then when she saw him, she said, he was like in a kind of cloud of darkness, of blackness.
Mm,
And so that's when she realized it was the young man's spirit. Um,
mhm.
and she said after a while, he just never came around anymore. And so, in a way, it kind of freaked me out a little bit because I was like, oh,
Yeah.
one of my like most crucial questions I failed to ask. But I was kind of like, but it felt like a right place for me. And
Mhm.
so I just said to the young man, I said, I'm here, I'm visiting, I respect this place, I see that this is a place of love and kindness and calmness. And, I just, I salute you, I honor you. And then
Mm-hmm.
there's a way that I ground myself and, draw like circle protection around myself. And I did that, and I never had any visits from him. So, but it is a question I'll make sure I ask in the future.
Oh yeah, I'm definitely adding that to my questions. I hadn't
Yeah,
even thought about that. Definitely adding that to my questions.
yeah, and it was a great sit.
Wow.
I mean, I ended up sitting there twice last month, about
Okay.
a couple weeks apart, and I'll go out and feed the chickens and the goats and the donkeys, and take walks around the property with the dogs, and bring in wood for the wood stove, and it was just wonderful. I love it, and she's a friend now. I mean, that's one of the things that I love about the house sitting, is that,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, you know them, but these
Making
are
new
people I've
friends.
kept in contact with now,
Yep.
and
Yep.
then they've invited me to come back and sit for them, or just to come back to visit.
Mm-hmm. So now, what has been your favorite international sit, and what type of animals did you sit for?
um, excuse me. Well, I love dogs. I mean, I'm a dog person. I'm a cat person too. As you saw, I had my little buddy Jorah.
Mm-hmm.
So, favorite place. I mean, I could say like the most beautiful place I've been was, the house in, Toronto, just outside of Rome, just because it had that incredible view. It was a beautifully beautiful house, and she introduced me to her friends, who are now my friends that I've gone back to visit.
Mm-hmm.
So as far as like beauty, that was the best place,
Mm-hmm.
and that had an additional kind of special piece to it, because she let me bring one of my girlfriends, who's now one of my
Oh,
best
okay.
friends. Like, she allowed me to bring my friend with me from the goat farm in
Mm-hmm.
northern Italy. And so now Hannah and I just hung out for 2 weeks and got to know each other even better. And now she's one of my best friends. So that was,
Wow.
yeah, that was the most beautiful. I'd say maybe the most kind of interesting was, my first house sit in Italy, when they let me use their car, because I
Okay.
was able to drive around. There are 6 medieval villages within an hour of where this town was located. So I'd put the dog in the car, and we drive to a new village and just walk around and sightsee, and go walking for hours at a nature reserve.
Oh,
And this
wow.
couple also had property, so we'd go there and walk around, and I'd pick figs and grapes.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Oh my gosh.
That's pretty awesome.
Okay. So tell us the different countries you've been to, and what has been your experience as a solo Black woman traveling to these
Okay.
different countries. Have they been
Um,
welcoming, not welcoming? What was your experience?
so I've been to, Italy several times. This last trip that I took last year, because I quit my job to travel last year, and I was going to travel for a year, ended up
Hmm.
traveling for about 7.5 months. So Italy, Scotland, England, Hungary, then back to Italy, Crete, Morocco, Albania, and then back
Okay.
to Italy.
So quite a bit of Europe.
Yeah,
Quite a
yeah.
bit in
Just,
Europe.
yeah,
Okay.
Europe's easy to get around in, because the flights
Yeah, I've
between
heard that.
countries are relatively inexpensive, or you could take the train, which is a lot of fun.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard that.
Um,
I've heard
and
that.
I've never had any problem as a solo Black woman, or just a solo woman. Period. I mean,
Hmm.
I have to say, I think that part of being older, in a way, it's sort of, I think in a way it's kind of a safety net, because I'm not
Yeah.
like this young hot thing running around.
Right.
So people just kind of like, oh, there's a woman, or just. I mean, it's a sad thing, but a lot of people who are older are sort of invisible. But I was really an anomaly, because I was traveling by myself.
Hmm.
People were like, well, where's your husband? You're here by yourself. Your husband let you do this by yourself. And I was like, my husband didn't let me do anything. I told him I was doing this, but I never felt any threat or anything.
Hmm.
Like as a matter of fact, like in Scotland, for example, people are super friendly. People are like, oh, you're talking, you're walking, and they're just chat me up. In
Hmm.
England, I was doing a work away, and I was actually waiting for my hostess, while she had a job thing. and I went into a pub, and it was all men. It was 15 middle-aged old English guys sitting around drinking pints, and they stopped and they looked at me, and I just said hello, and and there was a female bartender there, and so
Mm-hmm.
to engage them, I was just like, oh, what beer do you recommend? So then they started chatting me up and like, oh, are you here by yourself? Are you walking? And so just had this really interesting conversation with 15 middle-aged English guys in a pub. I mean, that was really funny. Albania, people, I don't know, different countries have different vibes. Albania, I gotta
Yeah.
say, like the vibe was very kind of repressed, but also understanding the history of the place is the same with Hungary. There's like an
Mm-hmm.
oppression because they were under communist rule, So there's a
Right.
difference to the vibe.
Right.
England was chill. English people are crazy about their dogs, so I really loved that about being in
Mm-hmm.
England. Like, and the dogs are
Mm-hmm.
just so cooperative and sweet. Um, Italy, yeah, I love the Italians. They're very emotive, and their hands are all over the place, and they're
Yeah.
very. Where I was, people were very generous, and and they were very pleased with my rudimentary Italian. So that was awesome. And then Morocco, I was visiting a girlfriend, and so the only reason I stuck out there was because I wasn't covering my head and wearing long clothes. I usually just dress in very baggy clothes anyway, but
Mm-hmm.
and people were kind of looking at me, but I think it was more so because I was in an area that's not a tourist area.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. So now, how long have you been doing pet sitting with Trusted House Sitter? How many years have you been doing that?
The first one was in 2021. Yeah,
Okay. Now
2021.
that was still kind of in the middle of COVID. How did that work? How did that work for you and for the family? I mean,
My
they were
family.
comfortable. No, the family that you went to visit, they were comfortable, just
Oh
still
yeah,
traveling and doing
yeah,
things, and because COVID
yeah.
was still
Because
kind of.
I went to Italy as the capacity of a nanny with one of my former nanny clients, and I went to take care of her children. And
Mhm,
then it was still relative, when COVID was still a thing.
mhm,
But in Italy, they had testing sites all over the place, and so before I would go to the next place, I mean, I only went to two places there, but before I did go, I got tested to make sure I wasn't taking contagion with me. You know,
right, right.
yeah, and so it wasn't really a problem. Yeah, I never felt like the it was. I never felt like it was a problem.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
Um, Tell us, what was your least favorite sit? Where was it, and why?
Excuse me. So I've only had good sits. Like my sits through Trusted House Sitters have all been really wonderful.
Hmm.
I did have an experience through a different organization, um, where, and this is why I've learned since then to make sure that I have a video tour. Like, I have a video
Yes.
conference with the host, but now I
Hmm.
always ask for a video tour of the house.
Tour. Yeah. Yeah.
Because in this situation, I'd gone to do a work away, and it was working as a mother's helper for the hostess woman's daughter, and the
Hmm.
daughter had 2-year-old twins. So I would be staying with the mom, the grandmother, and then going over to the daughter's house. So on the way from the train, the lady sort of offhandedly remarked that she was a hoarder. She says, "Oh, I'm a bit of a hoarder," and I'm just like, "Okay, well, we're all a bit of a hoarder in some ways." But that house is really off the chain, and I mean, it wasn't healthy. It was mold growing up, like black mold growing on the
Oh my
walls and
God.
under the sink. The house was very damp. It was not clean, and it was really awful. And then also the lady, she's a bargain hunter, so there they mark food down at one of the stores, like around 4 or 5 o'clock. They mark food down, so she'd go there to shop, but she's buying meat that expired that day. So
Oh my God.
fortunately, I was staying in
Whew.
I was staying in a trailer in her backyard, a camper
Hmm.
that was, relatively clean, and it was warm because I had the heater going all the time because she didn't really cut the heat on in her house. It was freezing in her house. And
Wow.
I mean, honestly, if I would have had to stay in the house, I would have just turned around and walked right out the door and said, I
Hmm.
can't live in this. This is not healthy. But the
Hmm.
fact that didn't have to be in the house, and I could be in the camper. I didn't have to eat her food. I mean, she offered it to me, but I was like, I'm not eating this. And then also as a mom, had who'd gone through exhaustion, I wanted to be there and help her daughter, and her daughter
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
around her children, and that's why I stayed. I was there for
Yeah.
3 weeks, and at one point it was freezing, it was below freezing, it was pouring rain, and I was like, I had on like 3 layers of clothes. I was under an electric blanket, and in this camper, and I was just like, this is hell, you know. But I said, well, look, I'm the ding dong who decided I wanted to come to England in the winter. I mean, it's not a warm.
Uh-huh.
It was
Hmm.
where I wanted to launch from last year. It was England, and then I was just like, this is just part of the experience, and that's what I
Yeah.
do. Like if something is a little uncomfortable or challenging, I'm like, this is part of the experience. I didn't want a regular life sitting home
Yeah.
in Maryland. I wanted to be
Yes.
challenged, and here I am. I don't want to get
Hmm.
black lung
Something
disease from
different.
breathing in this fungus. So yeah, that was the most uncomfortable living situation I've been in. And I do
Wow.
know that's one thing I just want to remark on. It's been a comment about cleanliness because people have
Hmm.
different variations of cleanliness.
Yes.
Some people,
Yes.
a house cleaner come in
Yeah.
and it's spotless and it's pet free and there's no mold and there's no cobwebs. In other places I've been in, I was I mean, like a place I was in recently, I looked around and I was like, none of the my trusted house sitter sisters would put up with this. They
Right.
wouldn't. I feel
Right.
like I'm kind of unusual because I've lived in rough situations. I was in the Peace Corps in Paraguay. So,
Mm-hmm.
I'm used to living like kind of rough, with
Yeah.
no running water, no electricity, everything's dusty, there's animals everywhere. So for me,
Hmm.
I think I just have a much higher tolerance of what other people would consider unlivable.
Yeah. Yeah. Because
Yeah.
for me, yeah, I have no tolerance, none at all. None. None, 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 none. Yeah. So, but I do the video calls, but I am going to start asking for the tours like you do. I think that's a good idea.
Mhm.
Because there's only been a couple that I didn't do a video call on, and those are the ones that weren't exactly what I call clean. Like you said, there's different levels. And one lady's like, I just had the house clean. Okay, well, whoever did it should be fired. Because, yeah, no, that's not my idea of clean. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I
No.
think that's a good idea. I like that to get a
Yeah.
tour, not just a video call. Ask for a tour.
Mhm.
So, okay.
Yeah.
Um. So, so for other women who are out there like yourselves who are working that job that they really don't like, they want to do something different, but they're married, they have children, even if their children are younger than yours,
Mhm.
but they still want to do this. What advice would you give those women?
Let's say just start locally, even if it's in your own city or a couple of cities away, and there's lots of short term or just weekend sets, just do that for a break. I mean, I've done that where I was just on the other side of DC in a neighborhood I'd never really explored or walked in, for 5 days, and it was beautiful, and it worked out perfectly actually because I went over there for 5 days. I was taking a class, so I didn't want to be disturbed because it was a webinar series. And then my husband took advantage of me being gone and he remodeled the kitchen, which is awesome. So I wasn't in the mix of the mess. But
Mm-hmm.
I got to see a new place. I'd go walking. It was close to the C&O Canal, and so I encourage people to just start off locally. I mean, like for me, I've never been to Philadelphia. And I have a friend there now, so I'm thinking like, oh, that'd be interesting to just pick up a weekend gig in Philly and go up
Yep.
there and hear what this big city is, great city is all what makes the city great.
Mm-hmm.
Even in DC, I mean, I've considered doing some DC sits, and I'm 2 minutes from the DC border. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, there's different ways to make it work. There like Diamond Crystal says, the gallivanting grandma. She
Mm-hmm.
takes her granddaughter with her sometimes. You
Mm-hmm.
could take your kids with you. You could take your husbands with you. I mean, it's all up to the owner, but some of them actually are okay with that. Some of
Mm-hmm.
them want couples. So your
Yeah.
husband can go with you, but you have to let them know, he has to have a profile, of course, with trusted
Mm-hmm.
house sitters. But some families want that. Some families want other families. They don't just want one person. I'm like, why do
Right.
you need a whole family? They're like, well,
No.
we're accustomed to having a family here and that's what we want. I'm like, okay, whatever. But, you can make it work. They can definitely do that. I was telling my single moms, if they're trying to do this, look for sits that are going on during your child's school breaks, like
Mm-hmm.
summertime, spring break, winter break. Those are
Mm-hmm.
perfect times to start. And like you said, they can either do it locally or they can go on a trip that they've been wanting to go on
Mm-hmm.
and find house sitting jobs there in
Yeah.
those areas, whether it's that country or another state or whatever. And that can be their vacation, but keep in mind you still have to do the sit. You're there for the job.
Mm-hmm.
But if you have downtime, you can go and do the different things and touristy stuff that you've wanted to do.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's one of the things too that's important when you're looking at the sets and really clarifying what the expectations are. Because some people are like, oh, my dog needs walking three times a day. Some people are like, oh, my dog wears diapers, so he's gonna need its diaper changed and stuff. So like,
Yeah.
really finding you're like, finding
No.
finding something that you're comfortable with. Like one of my
Right.
parts of this sit I just did at the farm was raking out the stable every day. I mean, how many of y'all gonna go rake out, goat poop every morning? It was like, oh, rise and
Mm-mm.
shine. So I think that's one of the things too. And I think recently we saw one where like the expectations had changed between the time that there was like the confirmation and then like the
Yeah.
actual time, like really clarifying. It's just like, okay, and having a backup plan too, of course, because
Uh-huh. Hmm.
they could cancel last minute, or you might not be able to make it, or like you get
Yeah.
there and the house isn't clean or it's haunted or whatever and you need to bail.
Right.
So it's always really good to have a plan B, have money for an
Absolutely.
Airbnb if you need to get out of there for whatever reason.
Absolutely. I had
Yeah.
a family last year in Colorado where I got there and they were still there.
Mm-hmm.
They were leaving that following morning. That night, they talked to me and like, well, I think we're gonna have to cancel because one of their kids got sick.
Oh, wow.
I was like, oh, okay. But I was down in the basement, so I was away from everybody. And they were like, we know this is last minute. We're not asking you to leave. It's okay if you want to stay, if you don't have an immediate sit, blah, 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 blah. I said, well, I'll see what I can find. And if not,
Mm-hmm.
then I'll go ahead and stay. And then the next morning, they were like, she says she's feeling better, da 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 da. We're going to go ahead and go.
Okay.
I'm like, okay, fine. So they packed up and they left. And they were supposed to be gone for, it was supposed to be like a long weekend. So they're supposed to be gone for like 4 nights, 3 nights, something like, yeah, 4 nights. After the second night, they texted me back, we'll be back tomorrow because now the wife is sick. So
Oh gosh. Wow.
they were like, yeah, but again, you don't have to leave. We know it's cutting short into your time, but we're not asking you to leave. So I'm like, okay. So
That's
that was
kind.
one
Yeah.
instance. So yeah, that was one instance. So I mean, if that wasn't an option, yeah, I would have had to find an Airbnb. So yeah, you're definitely
Mm-hmm.
right. Got to have a backup plan.
Yeah.
Got to
Yeah.
have a backup plan. But I usually book my stuff back to back, so I don't have to worry about that. But
Okay.
I'm finding that the longer sits work out better. They're more stable,
Mm-hmm.
and the shorter sits like these weekend sits. they tend to cancel more
Oh, that's
because
interesting.
yeah, they're not
Hmm.
really losing money because a lot of a lot of the places they go to just for these short sits they can drive to.
Mm.
They're going to visit family, so they're not losing money on hotels or whatever
Mm.
like that. So yeah, I've had a few of them last year that canceled because they were those short sits, and they're like, yeah, no, we're not able to go, and oh, it was a work thing and they're not going to do it now, or they chose somebody else or
Oh, okay.
whatever. But my longer sits a month or longer, yeah, those have definitely been very stable, very
I
stable.
like
So
that. Yeah.
yeah, I definitely like that, and I'm going to focus on those more. And I think in this year 2025, because I really want to get back to cruising. I love cruising, and I haven't worked like a government job or a stable job like that since I left my government job in 2021. That's the same year my son graduated.
Okay.
So I really want to get back to cruising. So I'm going to focus more on remote work and pet sitting while I'm remote working, but also doing cruises. So the remote work money is going to be for cruising. And I'm going to set my house sits in the embarkation port areas.
Oh, that's smart.
Yeah.
I like that. Yeah.
That's the
Yeah.
plan
I
for
want to go.
2025.
I'm sorry. What?
I said that's the plan for 2025. So,
That's right on. Yeah.
hmm
I mean, this year I'm not planning on taking any, long international trips. Just like the dynamic of my house has changed, and my sister's living with me
hmm
now, and until she is in her own housing and stable and stuff, then I'm here. I mean, I felt fine like running off and leaving the children and my animals with my husband, but I'm not going to run off and like, hey, here's my sister who needs care. I'm going to,
yeah,
go on. But yeah, I mean, definitely once I feel like I'm kind of free of, that responsibility, then yeah, for sure, I'm going to hit the road
hmm
again. Um,
yeah,
I mean, it's not expensive. It's not an inexpensive way to travel. I mean, the most expensive thing really is getting there in the first place.
yeah,
To
airfare.
get there. But yeah, like I just learned that if you want to go someplace in Europe, it's cheaper to fly into London and then catch a flight out of London to one of those other countries. So that's going to be
Oh,
my
okay, okay.
strategy
Yeah,
in the future for
that's good to
traveling.
know. That's an excellent strategy. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
good to know.
yeah. Because the first couple times I bought round trip tickets, but then I ended up not leaving out of where I thought I was going to be. So I
hmm
either, I had to travel like cross country, to get to where my original departure place was,
hmm
or I decided to extend my trip, and then that ended up costing me money to change my flight. So now I
hmm
just buy a
hmm
one way ticket, and I figure when I'm ready to come home, I'll find another one way ticket. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's
There
that's
you go.
much better. It works better for me. But yeah, I
Mm,
mean, this is the way I'm going to travel. I mean, I used to want to
yep.
retire to Italy. They promote the like, oh, you buy a house for $1. That's unless you got $200,000 to renovate a house. That $1 house ain't no $1 house. Um, but with the trusted house sitters, I can be all over that country, or any
hmm
country, and not have to make an investment and still have this life that I want. I'm self-employed, so I'm a culinary educator. I do a bunch of different things. So I'm a culinary educator. I'm a postpartum doula. I design and install gardens. So I have a lot of like kind of gigs. So I'm not tied to any full time thing anymore.
hmm
And so I
hmm
just decided I'm just going to arrange my year, my work schedule. So then I do have this block of time every year to travel. And then I'll come home for a while, and then I'll leave.
Yeah,
I'm always
yeah.
yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that. I love that. So, okay, well, um, I'm gonna wrap this up because I have a Zoom meeting that I gotta be on soon. But what advice would you give to any woman or even a man who's thinking about doing this, who's been contemplating it, but the what ifs have keep creeping up? What advice would you give them to just get started?
Yeah, just I mean, if you're afraid to go overseas, just like I said, start with a local sit. A weekend sit or a week away or in a town that you've always wanted to visit, especially if you work remotely. That's super easy. But don't let fear stop you. And so, I mean, the world is amazing. The world's amazing,
Hmm.
and like I said, like people are the same, places are the same overall. But just why limit yourself to one thing? Like take a chance and leap, go for it. Just get out there and see, and you'll be surprised what you can find about yourself and about other people. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. The great adventure. I'm waiting. I'm so ready. I'm so ready. I was like, oh, just let me get out of here. But I'm hanging for a minute.
Yeah. So when you go back and start traveling, are you going to go back to Italy or are you going to try someplace new?
I'll always go back to Italy. It's my favorite place. And, my best friend is there now. One of my best friends lives there on the goat
Hmm.
farm. It's a beautiful place. There's interesting food. It's just gorgeous. I do want to travel more extensively for sure. I mean, like with the Schengen, where you can only be in those countries for 3 months and you have to leave for 3 months
Hmm.
and then come back. That's why I ended up in Albania and Morocco last year, and Croatia the year before that. But like in the long run, I would love to go to travel to motherland. You know that
Hmm.
needs, but I think in that capacity, I would do it differently. I wouldn't do it as a house sitter. I would do it through a workaway the workaway platform, because then I would get
Hmm.
to know people. And I think that's
Yeah.
the beautiful thing about trusted house sitters is like it's calm and it's beautiful and it's quiet. Most of those houses are owned by expats, by mostly Brits and Americans. And
Hmm.
unless you make an effort to meet people in those communities, you're going to be kind of isolated. But if you are interested in being immersed in some place, then I think there's other platforms to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. I
So
agree with that.
yeah,
Hmm.
Africa definitely needs to be more of a work away thing. And for the house
Hmm.
sitting, I want to go to Portugal, Spain. Um, I want to go everywhere. Basically, there's no
Me
place I
too.
don't
Me
want to
too.
go.
Everywhere. Yep.
Yeah,
Me too. Well, I hope to see you out here on these trusted house sitter streets. We could meet up somewhere. That would
yeah,
be cool to do that.
yeah.
Is there any last bit of advice or suggestions or strategies that you want to say before we go?
Mm, don't know. I think Well, for me, I realized like I had to make traveling a priority. Like kind of like whatever I do
Yes.
needs to support this. So and
Mm-hmm.
making choices. So it's like, oh, I could go to Starbucks today or someplace and get a nice coffee and spend $6 or $10 and have this little snack, or I could put that money in a fund that I don't touch. That's only for traveling, and then I could have a fantastic $10 meal in a little trattoria, or by the water someplace, or in a family
Mm-hmm.
owned restaurant. So
Mm-hmm.
making a decision about how important is travel to you, and then living accordingly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And to any moms out there who are still debating or thinking they can't do that, or I know finances is a big thing for us single moms.
Hmm.
Start with remote jobs. You can do like a part-time remote job. And if you don't think you have the skills, I guarantee you do, because if you've been on your job for 10, 15, 20 years, you've developed skills. You
Hmm.
use those skills to go get a remote job, a work from home job where you stay home, and you can do it part-time, and that can turn into full-time if you want it to.
Hmm.
But there are ways to work around that. So many of us stay on a job that we hate because we need it,
Yeah.
either for the flexibility, either for the benefits, the salary, for whatever reason. But
Hmm.
there are other ways to make money that you don't have to keep doing what you don't like doing. I've worked a job for
Right.
15 years. And I just, the more and more I stayed, the more and more I hated it. I hated it. I was like, life is too short for that.
For
So
sure. For sure.
that's my take on it. That's my take on it. But Again, I thank you so much for taking your time out to speak with us today. I know you are super busy. I truly, truly appreciate you. And I do definitely hope to meet you somewhere in the world. So
Yeah. Yeah, we'll run into
you
each
enjoy.
other. Thank you for inviting me. This has been great. Yeah, I'm a
Absolutely.
huge proponent
Absolutely.
of house sitting. I told everyone I met who was asking me how I was traveling, like, you got to check out this website. You got to check this out.
Hmm.
And so hopefully there's some new people out there because of getting pointed in this direction.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yep. Well, you enjoy the rest of your week and your weekend. And we are out, you guys.
All
Thank you
right.
so
Take
much for
care.
tuning in. Until next time.
All righty. Bye.
Bye.